The entire restaurant held its breath. Don Salvatore, the most feared mafia boss in New York, had just humiliated the shy waitress Sienna for a mistake she didn't make. He thought she was weak. He thought she was a nobody. He was wrong. Instead of apologizing, Sienna looked the Don in the eye and corrected him, not in English, but in a rare ancient Sicilian dialect that hasn't been spoken in the underworld for 50 years. The room went ice cold. The Don's hand froze halfway to his gun. In that moment he realized this wasn't just a waitress. She was a ghost from a past he tried to bury, and she was the only one who could save his life. The kitchen of Lorelloia, Manhattan's most pretentiously expensive Italian restaurant, smelled of white truffles, seared wagyu, and pure unadulterated panic. Move, move, move. If that silverware isn't polished to a mirror finish, I will personally see to it that you never work in this city again. Gerard, the floor manager, was a man on the verge of a cardiac event. He wiped a sheen of sweat from his receding hairline with a silk handkerchief, his eyes darting between the clock and the velvet-roped entrance. It was 7:55 p.m. They had 5 minutes. Sienna adjusted her apron, keeping her head down. She hated nights like this. At 23, she had perfected the art of being invisible. She wore her chestnut hair in a tight, severe bun that pulled at her scalp, and she wore glasses she didn't actually need, just to create a barrier between her hazel eyes and the prying stares of the Wall Street wolves who frequented the place. "See," Gerard barked, snapping his fingers in her face. She flinched, gripping her tray tighter. "Yes, Miss Gerard, you are on water duty, sparkling still and ice. Nothing else. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look them in the eye. Do not breathe too loudly. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir. But who is coming?" Gerard looked at her as if she had just asked what color the sky was. The Moretti family, Sienna, Don Salvatore Moretti, and his son Lorenzo. The Capo dei Capi. They rented the entire VIP mezzanine. A $200,000 dinner bill is expected. If you spill a single drop of San Pellegrino, I will feed you to the sharks. Sienna felt a cold shiver trace its way down her spine. The Morettis. Even in the shelter of the kitchen she knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name, though few dared to whisper it. They owned construction firms, shipping docks, and half the politicians in Albany. But that was just the surface. Underneath they were the iron fist of the East Coast Mafia. I understand," she whispered. She turned back to the polishing station, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up a crystal goblet. She wasn't trembling from fear of the Mafia, though. She was trembling because the name Moretti triggered memories she had spent 10 years trying to bury, memories of a sun-drenched terrace in Palermo, of lemon trees, and of a life that had been stolen from her in a single night of fire and blood. "Just keep your head down," she told herself. "You're just Sienna the waitress. You're nobody." "Hey," a soft voice whispered beside her. It was Ricky, the sous chef, looking concerned. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Ricky, Sienna lied, forcing a weak smile. "Just Gerard is intense tonight." "It's the Morettis," Ricky muttered, checking the sauce on a pan of veal scallopini. "Rumor has it Don Salvatore is in a foul mood. A deal in Chicago went south. Lost 20 million. He's looking for someone to take it out on." Sienna didn't reply. She just focused on the glass in her hand, rubbing a non-existent smudge until the crystals squeaked. Outside, the heavy oak doors of the restaurant swung open. The air in the kitchen seemed to be sucked out into the dining room. Silence fell over the line cooks. Even the sizzling of the pans seemed to quiet down. Gerard burst back into the kitchen, his face pale. "They're here. Line up. Everyone line up." The entourage didn't walk. They prowled. 6 men in total entered Lorelloia. 4 of them were clearly bodyguards. Hulking walls of muscle squeezed into suits that cost more than Sienna's yearly rent. They wore earpieces and scanned the room with dead shark-like eyes. But the 2 men in the center absorbed all the light in the room. To the left was Lorenzo Moretti. He was undeniably devastating, tall, perhaps 6 feet 3 inches, with shoulders that filled out his bespoke navy Tom Ford suit with predatory grace. His hair was jet black, slicked back but not greasy, and his jawline looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't look at the staff lined up by the wall. He looked through them, checking exits, checking sightlines. He was the enforcer, the future king. A Glock 19 was likely tucked beneath that tailored jacket resting against his ribs. And then there was Don Salvatore. He was older, perhaps in his late 60s, leaning heavily on an ebony cane topped with a silver lion's head. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit and a long cashmere overcoat draped over his shoulders like a cape. His face was a map of hard-won battles, deep lines etched around a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. His eyes were dark, hooded, and utterly terrifying. The manager, Gerard, bowed so low he nearly had but the hostess stand. Don Salvatore, Mr. Lorenzo, it is the honor of a lifetime to welcome you to Loraloya. Your table is prepared. Don Salvatore didn't look at him. He simply tapped his cane on the marble floor. Clack. The wine, the Don rasped. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together. Did you get the 82 Sassicaia? Yes, of course, Don Salvatore, Gerard squeaked. We flew it in from Tuscany this morning. Specifically for you. It has been decanting for 2 hours. The Don grunted, a sound of minimal approval. He began to move toward the VIP mezzanine, his limp pronounced but dignified. Lorenzo walked a half-step behind him, his icy blue eyes finally sweeping over the line of staff. When his gaze landed on Sienna, she felt a physical jolt like an electric shock. She quickly lowered her eyes, staring at his polished Oxford shoes. She couldn't let him see her. Not really. She was just part of the furniture. Wait, Lorenzo said. His voice was smooth, a rich baritone, but it carried the sharpness of a whip. The procession stopped. Gerard froze. Yes, Mr. Lorenzo. Lorenzo stepped closer to the line of waitstaff. He stopped directly in front of Paolo, the head waiter, a man who prided himself on his Italian heritage, though he was born in New Jersey and learned his Italian from Duolingo. You, Lorenzo said, looking at Paolo. You're serving us tonight. Yes, sir, Paolo stammered, puffing up his chest. I am the head waiter. I will ensure you smell like fear, Lorenzo said calmly. And cheap cologne. My father has a migraine. If you hover over him smelling like whatever that is, he will lose his appetite. And if he loses his appetite, I get upset. Paolo turned beet red. I apologize, sir. It is acqua di Parma. Get out of my sight. Lorenzo dismissed him with a flick of his hand. Paolo looked like he might cry. He scrambled back into the kitchen. Gerard looked around, panic rising in his throat. He needed a server immediately, someone quiet, someone who wouldn't smell, someone who wouldn't try to chat up the Don. His eyes landed on the petite figure at the end of the line. Sienna, Gerard hissed. Sienna's head snapped up. No, please, no. Step forward, Gerard commanded, grabbing her arm and pulling her in front of the 2 Mafia giants. This is Sienna. She is very quiet. She will serve you tonight. Lorenzo looked down at her. She felt tiny next to him. He studied her face, his eyes narrowing slightly behind his lashes. He seemed to be analyzing her, searching for a flaw. She held her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She's shaking, Lorenzo observed dryly. I'm sorry, Sienna whispered, her voice barely audible. Don Salvatore turned slowly, leaning on his cane. He looked at Sienna with bored, tired eyes. Does she have hands? Can she pour wine without dropping the bottle? Yes, sir, Sienna said, forcing her voice to steady. I can. The Don stared at her for a long, uncomfortable second. Then he sniffed the air near her. Soap. Unscented. Good. Let's eat. He turned and walked up the stairs. Lorenzo lingered for a fraction of a second longer. He leaned in, his voice dropping so only she could hear. Don't make a mistake. My father isn't known for his forgiveness. Then he turned and followed his father, leaving Sienna standing in the foyer, her legs feeling like jelly. What are you waiting for? Gerard hissed in her ear, shoving a heavy silver tray into her hands. The antipasto, go. The VIP mezzanine was dimly lit, overlooking the main dining floor like a king's balcony. The table was set with white linen, heavy silver cutlery, and the bottle of 1982 Sassicaia that cost more than a small car. Sienna moved like a ghost. She placed the bread basket down, homemade focaccia with rosemary and sea salt without making a sound. She poured the sparkling water, twisting her wrist perfectly at the end to prevent a drip. The bodyguard stood at the corners of the balcony, facing outward. It was just the Don and Lorenzo at the table. The tension between father and son was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. The construction on the Jersey waterfront has stalled, Lorenzo said, breaking a piece of bread. He didn't eat it. He just crumbled it. The unions are asking for another 5%. Give them 2, Don Salvatore grunted, staring at his wine glass. And break the knees of the representative who asked for 5. Remind them who paved that road. It's risky, Papa. The feds are watching the union leaders closely right now. I don't pay you to tell me about risks, Lorenzo. The Don snapped, his eyes flashing with sudden anger. I pay you to handle them. You've been soft lately ever since London. Lorenzo's jaw tightened, a muscle feathered in his cheek. I'm not soft. I'm cautious. There's a difference. Sienna approached with the appetizer, carpaccio of Sicilian red prawns with blood orange reduction and fennel pollen. It was the chef's masterpiece. She placed the plates down gently. Carpaccio de gamberi rossi, sir, she murmured. Don Salvatore looked at the plate. He picked up his fork and poked at the delicate raw prawn. He took a small bite. He chewed slowly. The room went silent. Lorenzo watched his father. Sienna stepped back into the shadows, clasping her hands behind her back. The Don spat the food into his napkin. He threw the napkin onto the table. Garbage. Sienna flinched. Papa Lorenzo sighed. It's the best seafood restaurant in the city. It's fake. Don Salvatore's voice rose, echoing slightly in the quiet mezzanine. They call this Sicilian. Bah. The prawns are cold dead things. And the orange? Sweet. It's candy. It's not a blood orange from the slopes of Etna. It's a sunkiss from Florida. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. I am tired of this city. I am tired of fake people and fake food. Bring me the chef. Papa, please, Lorenzo said, his voice low in warning. Don't cause a scene tonight. I will cause a scene if I want to. The Don turned his fury towards Sienna. You girl. Sienna stepped forward, her heart in her throat. Yes, Don Salvatore. Take this away. It insults me. Tell the chef he doesn't know the difference between a blood orange and a tangerine. Go. Sienna reached for the plate, but she hesitated. She looked at the dish. She looked at the glistening reduction of the sauce. She knew that smell. She knew that color. It wasn't Florida orange. It wasn't fake. It was Tarraco, the queen of oranges, grown only in the volcanic soil of Catania during the winter. It was rare, expensive, and perfect. The chef hadn't made a mistake. The Don was wrong. But telling a Mafia Don he was wrong was a suicide mission. I said take it, Don Salvatore barked. Sienna took a breath. A strange calm washed over her. It was the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose. She couldn't let the chef be fired or worse, hurt for serving perfection. And more than that, her heritage, her blood was offended by his ignorance disguised as arrogance. With respect, Signore, Sienna said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Lorenzo looked up, surprised she was speaking. The prawns are from Mazzara del Vallo, Sienna said. And the orange, it is not sweet because it is candy. It is sweet because it is Moro, harvested in late January. The soil on the eastern slope of Etna gives it that specific amaro, that bitterness at the end. The silence that followed was absolute. Don Salvatore slowly turned his head to look at her. His eyes were wide, not with anger but with shock. She wasn't speaking English anymore. She had switched. Without realizing it, Sienna had slipped into the dialect, not the standard Italian taught in schools. She was speaking Siciliano, specifically the dialect of the inland mountains near Corleone. A thick, guttural ancient language that cut off the ends of words and rolled the R's deep in the throat. What did you say? The Don whispered, his voice trembling. Sienna realized what she had done. Her hand flew to her mouth. She had exposed herself. Lorenzo was staring at her, his blue eyes intense, calculating. He recognized the sound, even if he didn't speak the dialect perfectly himself. It was the language of his grandfather. I apologize, Sienna stammered, switching back to English. I just meant the chef used good ingredients. I will take it away. No, Don Salvatore commanded. He raised a hand, stopping her. Say it again. Sir? The dialect, the Don demanded, leaning forward, his eyes searching her face. Where did you learn to speak the tongue of the Entroterra? You are a waitress in New York. You look like a college student. How do you know the taste of a Moro orange from the eastern slope? Sienna swallowed hard. She couldn't tell him the truth. If she told him her last name was Vitali, She would be dead before dessert. The Vitali and Moretti families had been at war for 50 years. Her father had been the Don of the Vitalis until the Morettis burned their compound to the ground 10 years ago. She was supposed to be dead. My grandmother, Sienna lied, her mind racing. She was from a village near Prizzi. She raised me. She was very particular about fruit. Don Salvatore studied her. He looked at her hands, her face, her posture. Prizzi, he muttered. Bad blood in Prizzi. He picked up his fork again. He took another bite of the prawn, dragging it through the sauce. He closed his eyes. You are right, he said softly. It is Moro. I've lost my taste with age. He opened his eyes and looked at Lorenzo. This girl, she has the old tongue. You hear that, Lorenzo? She speaks better than you. Lorenzo didn't smile. He was watching Sienna with a new dangerous interest. He wasn't looking at her like a waitress anymore. He was looking at her like a puzzle he needed to solve. What is your name? Lorenzo asked. Sienna, sir. Sienna, Lorenzo repeated, testing the name on his tongue. You should be careful, Sienna. People who know too much about the Entroterra, they tend to have short lives in this city. I know nothing, sir, Sienna whispered. Just about oranges. We'll see, Lorenzo said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold money clip. He peeled off 5 $100 bills and placed them on the table. For the lesson on citrus. Now leave us. Sienna nodded, grabbed the tray and backed away. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought they could hear it. As she reached the kitchen door, she glanced back. Lorenzo was still watching her. His body turned in his chair. His eyes locked on her retreating figure. He knew maybe not everything, but he knew she was lying. She had survived the appetizer. But the main course was coming, and Sienna had a terrible feeling that tonight, she was on the menu. The kitchen was chaos, but for Sienna, the real storm was inside her chest. Her hands were still shaking from the encounter with the Don. She had slipped. 10 years of hiding, 10 years of dyeing her hair and wearing thrift store clothes, and she had almost thrown it all away because of a blood orange. Sienna, Gerard barked, snapping her out of her daze. Table 4 needs a refill. And the VIP table, Mr. Lorenzo requested another bottle. The Barolo, the 1996 Conterno. Go to the cellar now. Sienna nodded, grateful for the excuse to disappear. Yes, Gerard. She hurried past the steamy dish pit and down the narrow, winding stone stairs that led to the wine cellar. The air down here was cool and smelled of damp earth and aged oak. It was silent, a sanctuary. She moved to the Italian section, her fingers trailing over the dusty bottles. Conterno, 1996. She found it. It was a heavy bottle worth more than her car. She gripped the neck of the bottle, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Just get through the night, she whispered. 1 more hour, then you clock out, go home to Queens and never come back. You ran away quickly. The voice came from the shadows near the stairs. It was low, smooth, and terrified her more than the darkness. Sienna spun around, clutching the wine bottle to her chest like a shield. Lorenzo Moretti stepped into the dim light of the single hanging bulb. He had removed his jacket, revealing a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, and a gun holster made of expensive tan leather strapped under his left arm. He looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and lethal. Mr. Moretti, Sienna gasped. I was just getting the wine. The wine can wait, Lorenzo said, walking slowly toward her. The cellar was cramped. With every step he took, the air seemed to get thinner. My father is impressed. He doesn't get impressed. He thinks you're a charming peasant girl with a good grandmother. He stopped 2 feet from her. She could smell his cologne, sandalwood, tobacco, and cold steel. I am just a waitress, sir, she said, lowering her gaze. Look at me, he commanded. Sienna forced her chin up. She met his ice-blue eyes. I know Prizzi, Lorenzo said softly. I spent 2 summers there when I was a boy. The dialect you spoke, it wasn't just Sicilian. It was high dialect. The kind spoken by the old families, the educated families. Peasant grandmothers in Prizzi don't speak like that. They speak rough. You spoke like a poet. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face. Sienna flinched, stepping back until her spine hit the wine rack. Lorenzo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. And your hands? He murmured, glancing down at her fingers wrapped white-knuckled around the bottle. No burn marks from the ovens. No calluses from scrubbing floors. You have manicured cuticles. You take care of yourself, Sienna. Who are you working for? I work for Lorelloya, she insisted, her voice trembling but defiant. Are you a spy? A plant? Did the Romanos send you? His voice dropped to a growl. He stepped closer, boxing her in. If you lie to me, I will find out. And I won't be as polite as I am being right now. I am nobody, Sienna cried out. I'm just a girl trying to pay rent. My grandmother, she worked for a wealthy family. She learned to speak properly from them. That's all. Please let me go upstairs. Lorenzo studied her face for a long, agonizing moment. He was looking for a crack in the mask. He saw fear, yes, but he also saw something else in her hazel eyes. Pride. A stubborn, fiery pride that didn't belong to a servant. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. I don't believe you. He pulled back, his eyes dropping to her neck. A thin silver chain was visible just above the collar of her uniform. What is this? He reached for it. Sienna slapped his hand away. The sound echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Sienna froze. She had just slapped the underboss of the Moretti crime family. Lorenzo looked at his hand, then back at her. His expression was unreadable. For a second she thought he was going to kill her right there. Instead, a slow dark smirk spread across his face. Feisty, he whispered. I like that. Suddenly, the heavy oak door at the top of the stairs burst open. Gerard's voice echoed down. See, Mr. Moretti, is everything all right? The Don is asking for the wine. Lorenzo didn't break eye contact with her. We're coming, he called back, his voice calm. He stepped back, giving her space. This isn't over, Sienna. Pour the wine. But don't think I'm not watching your every move. He turned and walked up the stairs. Sienna slumped against the wine rack, her legs giving out. She pulled the silver chain out of her shirt. Attached to it was a small heavy ring bearing a crest, a lion holding a rose, the crest of the Vitali family. She hastily tucked it back inside her uniform, grabbed the bottle and forced her legs to move. She was walking back into the lion's den. When Sienna returned to the VIP mezzanine, the atmosphere had shifted. It was heavier. Don Salvatore was laughing, a rare, raspy sound at something Vinny the butcher, one of his captains, had said. The table was full now. 3 other men had joined them. Sienna approached the table to uncork the Barolo. Her hands were steady now. The adrenaline from the cellar had turned into a cold, hyper-aware focus. It was a survival mechanism she had learned from her father. When the wolf is at the door, you do not shake. You sharpen your knife. She poured a taste for Lorenzo. He didn't look at the wine. He looked at her. He nodded. She moved to the Don. As she poured the deep red liquid into Salvatore's glass, her eyes scanned the room. It was habit. Below in the main dining area, the dinner rush was peaking. Waiters rushed back and forth, but Sienna's gaze snagged on something. A man at a corner table. He was alone. He was eating the ossobuco, but he wasn't looking at his food. He was looking at his watch. He wore a gray suit that fit poorly around the chest. Too bulky. Sienna frowned. She knew suits. Her father wore only Brioni. A bulky chest meant a vest. A Kevlar vest. She poured the wine, her heart rate picking up. Ignore it, she told herself. Not your problem. Let the Morettis die. They killed your family. She moved to step away. The man in the gray suit stood up. He didn't walk towards the exit. He walked towards the stairs leading to the mezzanine. He reached into his jacket. Simultaneously, Sienna saw a flicker of movement from the high window across the street. A glint of light, a reflection, a scope. Time seemed to slow down. The man on the stairs was a distraction. The real threat was outside. Don Salvatore was raising the glass of wine to his lips. He was sitting directly in front of the window. Sienna didn't think. She didn't weigh the pros and cons. Her body simply reacted to the training ingrained in her childhood. Get down! She screamed. She dropped the tray. The crystal glasses shattered on the floor with a deafening crash. In the same motion, she lunged forward. She didn't shove the Don. He was too heavy. Instead, she grabbed the edge of the heavy table and heaved it upward with surprising strength, flipping it onto its side just as the glass of the window behind them exploded. Crack! A high-velocity bullet slammed into the overturned mahogany table, right where Don Salvatore's chest had been a second ago. Splinters of wood exploded into the air. Chaos erupted. Sniper! Lorenzo roared, tackling his father to the ground behind the cover of the table. The bodyguards drew their weapons instantly, scanning the room. The man in the gray suit on the stairs pulled out a submachine gun. But before he could aim, Vinny the butcher put 2 rounds in his chest. The assassin tumbled backward down the stairs, screaming. Sienna was on the floor, covered in wine and broken glass. She was panting, her ears ringing. Lorenzo was on top of his father, shielding him. He looked up, his eyes wild. He looked at the bullet hole in the table. Then he looked at Sienna. She was curled up in a ball, her arms over her head. The shooting stopped. The restaurant below was screaming. People were stampeding for the exits. Clear. We're clear, one of the bodyguards shouted, pressing his earpiece. Shooter is on the north roof. Get a team there. Lorenzo slowly stood up, helping his father to his feet. Don Salvatore was pale, clutching his chest, but alive. He looked at the shattered window, then at the table that had saved his life. Then both men looked at the waitress. Sienna slowly lowered her arms. She tried to stand up, but her knees were weak. A shard of glass had cut her arm. Blood was trickling down her white sleeve. You, Don Salvatore rasped. He pointed a shaking finger at her. How did you know? Sienna couldn't breathe. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by terror. She had just saved the man she hated. And in doing so, she had revealed herself completely. No waitress reacts that fast. No waitress recognizes a sniper glint. I saw the reflection, she stammered. Lorenzo stepped over the broken glass. He grabbed her uninjured arm and hauled her to her feet. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked awestruck and suspicious. You flipped a 300-pound solid oak table, Lorenzo said, his voice tight. And you called the shot before the glass broke. I was lucky, Sienna lied. Luck doesn't move like that, Lorenzo said. He looked at his father. Papa, we have to go. The car is out back. We're taking her. What? Sienna panicked. She tried to pull away. No, let me go. I saved you. Exactly, Lorenzo said, his grip tightening like an iron band. You saved the Don, which means you are either a guardian angel, or you knew the hit was coming because you were part of it. I wasn't. We'll discuss it at the compound, Don Salvatore said, his voice returning to its granite hardness. Bring her. Don't let her out of your sight. No, Sienna screamed, struggling. But Lorenzo was too strong. He dragged her towards the kitchen exit, surrounded by a phalanx of bodyguards. As they burst out into the cool night air of the alley, Sienna realized her life as a ghost was over. She was back in the world of the living, and the living were much more dangerous. The interior of the armored SUV was a vacuum of silence, hermetically sealed against the chaos they had left behind in Manhattan. Outside the tinted bulletproof glass, the city lights blurred into streaks of neon violence, but inside the air was thick enough to choke on. Sienna sat pressed against the cold leather of the door, as far away from Lorenzo Moretti as the confined space would allow. Her arm was throbbing, a dull rhythmic ache where the glass shard had sliced her skin, but she welcomed the pain. It was the only thing keeping her grounded. The adrenaline that had allowed her to flip a heavy oak table and scream commands at a Mafia Don was fading, leaving behind a cold, trembling terror. She stole a glance at Lorenzo. He was not looking at her. He was staring straight ahead, his profile sharp and predatory in the passing street lights. He was typing furiously on a secure phone, his thumbs moving with lethal precision. Perimeter breach. Secure the North Shore. I want names, he murmured into the device, then hung up. He slowly turned his head, his ice blue eyes locking onto hers. In the dark car they looked almost gray like storm clouds. He didn't speak. He just watched her, analyzing the rise and fall of her chest, the blood drying on her white waitress uniform, the way her hands were clenched into fists in her lap. He was dissecting her. You're bleeding on the leather, he said finally. His voice was devoid of emotion, a flat statement of fact. I'm sorry, Sienna whispered, instinctively covering the cut on her forearm. I'll pay for the cleaning. A dry, humorless laugh escaped his lips. You just saved the Capo dei Capi from a sniper's bullet, and you're worried about a cleaning bill. You really are an enigma, Sienna. The car slowed, turning off the highway and onto a winding private road lined with ancient gnarled oak trees. They passed through a set of massive wrought iron gates that stood at least 20 feet high, topped with spikes that gleamed under the floodlights. Guards with assault rifles patrolled the perimeter. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. It was the Moretti estate, the stronghold of the enemy. Sienna felt a wave of nausea. 10 years ago, she had promised herself she would never be this close to the Moretti power again. She had spent a decade erasing herself, becoming a ghost, living in the shadows of Queens. And now she was being driven right into the heart of the beast. The SUV crunched to a halt on the gravel driveway in front of a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had been transported piece by piece from the hills of Tuscany. The front doors swung open before the engine even cut out. Rocco, the head of security, opened the back door. "We're clear, boss." Lorenzo stepped out first, then reached in and grabbed Sienna's uninjured arm. His grip was firm, not painful, but there was no escaping it. He pulled her out into the cool night air. Don Salvatore had emerged from the lead vehicle. He was leaning heavily on his bodyguard, his face pale, clutching his chest. The near-death experience had rattled him, but his eyes were still sharp. "Get the doctor to the West Wing," Lorenzo commanded the staff swarming the entrance. "Check his heart. Check for shock." Salvatore paused at the top of the stone steps. He looked back at Sienna. For a brief moment, the terrifying mask of the Don slipped, revealing a tired old man. "The girl," Salvatore rasped. "Treat her well, Lorenzo. She bled for us." "I know what to do, Papa," Lorenzo said, his voice tightening. "Go." They watched the Don disappear into the house. Once he was gone, the atmosphere shifted. Lorenzo turned to Sienna and the protective sun vanished. The ruthless underboss returned. "Come with me," he ordered. He didn't wait for her to agree. He marched her through the grand foyer, past marble statues and oil paintings that cost more than her entire life's earnings. The house was silent, heavy with the weight of its own secrets. Servants in black uniforms scurried out of their path, keeping their heads down. They knew better than to look at Lorenzo when he had that look in his eyes. He led her up a sweeping staircase and down a long, dimly lit corridor, finally pushing open a set of double mahogany doors. His office. It smelled of expensive tobacco, old paper and gun oil. A fire was crackling in the hearth, casting long dancing shadows against the walls lined with bookshelves. Lorenzo pointed to a leather armchair in front of the massive desk. "Sit." Sienna sat. She felt small in the chair. Lorenzo walked to a side table and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He walked over and handed her one. "Brandy. Drink it. It helps with the shock." Sienna took the glass, her hands shaking slightly. She took a sip. The liquid burned her throat, but the warmth bloomed in her stomach, steadying her nerves. Lorenzo didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of his desk, crossing his ankles, towering over her. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving her face. "I have a very good tech team, Sienna," he began softly. The gentleness of his tone was more terrifying than if he had shouted. "While we were in the car, I had them run your face through the databases. NYPD, FBI, DMV, even the Interpol watch list." Sienna's heart skipped a beat. She set the glass down on the desk, afraid she might drop it. Lorenzo reached behind him and picked up a tablet. He tapped the screen and turned it toward her. "Sienna Miller," he read, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Born in Dayton, Ohio. Social Security number issued in 1998. Parents deceased in a car accident. Moved to New York 3 years ago." He swiped the screen. A red box appeared with the word error flashing. "It's a very good fake," Lorenzo admitted. "The physical ID card is a masterpiece, but the digital footprint, it's a ghost. The Social Security number belongs to a woman who died in infancy in 1999. The high school records in Ohio, they don't exist. There is no birth certificate." He set the tablet down with a clatter. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. "So," he whispered, his face inches from hers. "You are not Sienna Miller. You speak the high dialect of the Sicilian mountains. You know how to identify a sniper scope by a reflection. You have the reflexes of a soldier, and you are working as a waitress in my city." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was unbearable. "Who sent you?" he growled. "Are you an assassin who got cold feet? Are you a plant from the Romanos?" Tell me the truth, and I might let you walk out of here alive. Sienna looked into his eyes. She saw the suspicion, the anger. But she also saw something else. Confusion. He couldn't reconcile the waitress he had yelled at earlier with the woman who had saved his father. She knew she couldn't lie anymore. The tech report had stripped her bare. If she lied again, he would see it and he would kill her. The only weapon she had left was the truth. I am not an assassin, she said, her voice trembling but clear. And I don't work for the Romanos. Then who are you? Sienna took a deep breath. She reached up to her neck and pulled the silver chain out from under her uniform. The heavy ring dangled there, spinning in the firelight. Lorenzo's eyes dropped to the ring. He froze. He recognized the crest. A lion holding a rose. That ring, Lorenzo breathed. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the warm skin of her neck as he took the ring in his hand. He stared at it as if it were a poisonous snake. It was my father's, Sienna said softly. Lorenzo looked up, his face pale. The pieces were falling into place and the picture they formed was impossible. Vitali, he whispered. The name hung in the air like smoke. My name is Sienna Vitali, she confessed. Daughter of Roberto Vitali. Lorenzo recoiled as if he had been burned. He stood up abruptly and backed away, putting the desk between them. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. Vitali, he muttered to himself. Impossible. We burned the compound 10 years ago, the night of Ash. Everyone died. The report said everyone died. I was in the wine cellar, Sienna said, tears finally spilling over. I was 13 years old, Lorenzo. My mother hid me in an empty barrel. I heard the gunfire. I heard the screams. I heard your voice. Lorenzo stopped pacing. He turned to look at her, horror dawning on his face. He remembered that night. It was his initiation. He was 18, eager to prove himself to his father. He had led the charge. He had given the order to torch the main house. You were the girl, he said, his voice hollow. Roberto had a daughter, a little girl with hazel eyes. We never found the body. I crawled out when the smoke cleared, Sienna said, wiping her face. I took a bus to the city. I cut my hair. I changed my name. I just wanted to live. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to disappear. Lorenzo looked at her. Really looked at her, seeing her not as a threat, but as a survivor of his own making. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. He had created this ghost. Why? He asked, his voice cracking. If you are a Vitali, if you know I am the one who destroyed your family, why did you save my father tonight? Why save us? Sienna stood up. She walked towards the fire, hugging her arms around herself. Because when I saw that red dot on his chest, I didn't see the monster of New York. I just saw an old man about to be murdered in cold blood. And my father, Roberto Vitali, he taught me that there is no honor in a cowardly kill. She turned to face him, her eyes blazing. I'm not you, Lorenzo. I don't kill for power. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. Even if I hate you for what you took from me. The room was silent. The fire crackled. Lorenzo stared at her, mesmerized. She was standing in the center of his power, admitting she was the heir to his family's greatest enemy. And yet, she held her head higher than any queen. The hatred he was supposed to feel, the ingrained duty to extinguish the Vitali bloodline, wasn't there. Instead, there was a fierce, burning admiration and something darker, something hotter. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped right in front of her. You realize, he said, his voice low and dangerous, that by admitting this, you have signed your own death warrant. If my father finds out a Vitali is in his house, he will finish the job. I know, Sienna whispered. Are you going to tell him? Lorenzo looked down at her. He looked at the blood on her arm, blood she had shed for his family. He looked at her lips, parted in fear and defiance. He slowly reached out. His hand trembled slightly as he cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. I should, he murmured. It is my duty as underboss. Sienna held her breath. His touch was electric. It was wrong. And yet it was the only thing holding her up. But I owe you a debt, Lorenzo said, his eyes darkening. A life for a life. You saved the king, so the prince will save you. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. For tonight you are Sienna the waitress. You are under my protection. I will build a golden cage for you, little wolf, and I pity anyone who tries to touch you. And tomorrow, she breathed. Tomorrow, Lorenzo whispered, his lips brushing hers. We figure out how to keep you alive in a house full of killers. Suddenly, the heavy oak door rattled violently. A fist pounded against the wood. Lorenzo, Don Salvatore's voice boomed from the hallway, muffled but furious. Open this door. I want to thank the girl myself. Why is it locked? Lorenzo pulled back, his eyes widening. The spell was broken. Reality came crashing back. He looked at Sienna, his expression hard and urgent. Not a word, he hissed, gripping her shoulders. If you speak Sicilian, if you show even an ounce of that Vitali pride, we are both dead. Do you understand? Sienna nodded, terrified. Lorenzo smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath and walked towards the door. He placed his hand on the lock, looked back at her one last time with a look of desperate warning, and turned the handle. The lion was coming in. The door swung open and Don Salvatore Moretti filled the frame. He had discarded his cane. The adrenaline of the assassination attempt had seemingly burned away his years, leaving only the ruthless warlord who had conquered New York in the 80s. So Salvatore rumbled, stepping into the room. His eyes darted from Lorenzo to Sienna, analyzing the distance between them, the tension in the air, the way Lorenzo's body was subtly angled to shield her. The girl who throws tables. Sienna lowered her head, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Don Salvatore. Look at me, he commanded. Sienna lifted her chin. She forced herself to look into the eyes of the man who had ordered the destruction of her childhood home. It took every ounce of her will not to show the hatred simmering in her gut. You have good reflexes, Salvatore said, walking closer. He stopped a foot away from her. Too good for a waitress who pours water. And you speak the high dialect. And now I find you drinking my best brandy in my son's private office. He turned to Lorenzo. Who is she really? Lorenzo didn't flinch. She is the woman who saved your life, Papa. That is who she is. Salvatore narrowed his eyes. That is what she did. That is not who she is. I have enemies, Lorenzo. Enemies who would plant a pretty girl in my path to gain my trust, only to slip a knife between my ribs when I am sleeping. If I wanted you dead, Sienna said, her voice cutting through the room clear and cold, I would have let that bullet hit you. I wouldn't have flipped a 300-pound table. Salvatore stared at her. Then slowly a dry, terrifying chuckle escaped his lips. She has teeth. Good. Suddenly the office door burst open again. It was Rocco, the head of security, looking pale. He was holding a tablet. Don Salvatore, boss, Rocco panted. We traced the shooter's phone. The one Vinny shot on the stairs. And? Lorenzo snapped. Who sent him? The Russos? The Triads? No, sir. Rocco swallowed hard. It wasn't a rival family. The text messages, they came from inside the network. They were authorized by a verified ID. The room went deathly silent. An inside job. The ultimate betrayal. Who? Salvatore whispered, his voice dropping to a lethal hiss. Rocco hesitated, looking terrified to speak the name. It was Capo Vinny. Vinny the butcher. Lorenzo swore loudly. Vinny. He was standing right next to us. He shot the guy on the stairs, Sienna said. All three men turned to look at her. Sienna stepped forward, her mind working fast. Think about it. The shooter on the stairs was a distraction. He had a submachine gun but didn't fire. He was waiting to draw your fire while the sniper on the roof took the shot. When the sniper missed, Vinny had to kill the distraction before he could talk. It's a classic cleanup. Lorenzo looked at her, stunned. How do you know that? Logic, Sienna lied quickly, though it was actually tactical training her father had drilled into her. It's the only thing that makes sense. Salvatore's face turned a shade of purple she had never seen before. Vinny had been his right hand for 20 years. Bring him to me, Salvatore whispered to Rocco. Alive. I want to peel him apart slowly. We can't, boss, Rocco said. Vinny took a car 10 minutes ago. He said he was going to secure the perimeter. He's gone. And he took the server codes with him. He's going to empty the accounts, Lorenzo realized, reaching for his gun. We have to lock down the banks. We need the master key. The master key is in the safe, Salvatore said. But Vinny changed the digital sequence this morning for security updates. We are locked out of our own money. Panic began to rise in the room. If Vinny drained the offshore accounts, the Moretti empire would crumble overnight. They would be vulnerable, broke, and easy pickings for the other families. Show me, Sienna said. What? Lorenzo asked. Show me the lock, Sienna demanded. Is it a cryptographic sequence, a cipher? It's a kinetic code based on Sicilian history, Salvatore said. Vinny knew I loved history. He said it, he mocked me with it. Lorenzo grabbed the laptop from the desk and spun it around. On the screen was a digital vault door. The prompt was a riddle in Italian. What runs beneath the lemons? Lorenzo muttered. Water, blood, roots. We've tried everything, Rocco said. We have 3 attempts left before the accounts wipe themselves. It's not water, Sienna said softly. She stared at the screen. She knew this riddle. It wasn't just history. It was a specific phrase used by the old families to denote the underground tunnels used during the 19th century uprisings. It was a test. A test only a true Sicilian aristocrat or a mafia don would know. Vinny was arrogant. He thought the Morettis had forgotten their roots. Move, Sienna said, pushing Rocco aside. See, if you get this wrong, we lose everything, Lorenzo warned, his hand hovering over her shoulder. Trust me, she whispered. She typed into the box. She didn't type blood or water. She typed Lumbra, the shadow. She hit enter. The screen flashed red, then green. Access granted. The room let out a collective breath that sounded like a gale force wind. Stop the transfers, Sienna commanded, her fingers flying across the keys. Freeze the accounts. Lock Vinny out. She hit one final key. Done. She stepped back, trembling slightly. Salvatore looked at the screen. Then he looked at Sienna. He walked over to her, his heavy boots thudding on the carpet. He took her face in his rough hands. You saved my life, he rasped. And now you saved my empire. Lumbra, the shadow. Only the old blood knows that riddle. He stared deep into her eyes. He was looking for the truth. And Sienna knew he was close to finding it. He knew she wasn't just a waitress. He knew she was royalty of the underworld. Who are you? Salvatore asked again. Soft and dangerous. Sienna opened her mouth to lie, but Lorenzo stepped in. She is mine, Lorenzo declared. His voice was final. Absolute. He pulled Sienna away from his father's grip and wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her flesh against his hard body. She is under my protection, Papa, Lorenzo said, his blue eyes locking with his father's dark ones. She stays here. She stays with me. And no one, not you, not Vinny, not the ghosts of the past, will touch her. Salvatore looked at his son. He saw the fire in Lorenzo's eyes, a fire he hadn't seen in years. The boy was gone. The king was rising. Salvatore smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. Good, the Don said. A king needs a queen. And this one has claws. He turned to Rocco. Mobilize the men. Find Vinny. Burn everything he owns. Tonight we go to war. Salvatore marched out of the room, Rocco trailing behind him. The door clicked shut. Sienna sagged against Lorenzo, the exhaustion finally hitting her. Lorenzo caught her, lifting her easily onto the edge of the desk. You knew the riddle, Lorenzo whispered, stepping between her legs, his hands resting on her thighs. How? My father taught me, Sienna admitted quietly. He said, Sienna, never forget where you come from. The shadow is always there. Lorenzo brushed a stray hair from her forehead. You are safe now, Sienna Vitali. You don't have to hide in the shadows anymore. Your father, if he finds out. Let him find out, Lorenzo said fiercely. I don't care if your last name is Vitali. You are the only person in this city who is real. You are the only one I trust. He leaned in, his lips hovering inches from hers. The air between them crackled with electricity, a mix of danger, history, and undeniable desire. You saved the king, Lorenzo murmured against her lips. Now let me save you. Sienna closed her eyes. For 10 years she had been running. For 10 years she had been alone. But as Lorenzo Moretti kissed her, a kiss that tasted of brandy and promises, she knew she wasn't running anymore. She was home. And the shy waitress was gone forever. And just like that, the invisible waitress became the queen of the New York underworld. From a spilled glass of water to saving a billion-dollar empire, Sienna proved that you should never judge someone by their uniform. She walked into the lion's den and didn't just survive. She tamed the beast. The war between the families might be over, but for Lorenzo and Sienna, the real story is just beginning. Can a Vitali and a Moretti truly rule together without the past tearing them apart? Or will the secrets they still keep destroy everything they've built? If you love this story full of twists, romance, and mafia justice, please smash that like button. It helps us create more long-form stories just for you. Don't forget to subscribe to Heartline Stories and hit the bell notification. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.